One
Okay.
thing, if I could change about most organizations, is one, they need to figure out what they have for assets right now.
Mm-hmm.
Most companies, or a lot of companies, I don't want to say most, don't know what's on their network. The second thing is they need to develop policies and processes focused on cradle to grave.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know when a device is coming into my organization. I want to continue tracking it within my organization, patching it, maintaining it. And when the day comes that I need to get rid of it, I want to actually get rid of it properly. That's probably some of the biggest issues that I've run into.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Future of Threat Intelligence podcast. Today I'm speaking with Daryl Hyland, Principal Security Research, specifically for IoT at Rapid7. Daryl, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, David.
So Daryl, you've got a long career in InfoSec, cybersecurity. Tell us something about yourself, what makes you tick, and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I've had a long career. I've been in security for close to 25 years. Prior to that, I had at least another 10, 12 years in IT. So it's been a long career. I've had a chance to be involved in a lot of different areas that kind of led me to where I'm at right now. Probably the big breaking point was as I had gone to work for a company that was a large Fortune 500 company, and they decided to merge, the merger of equals. And an opportunity came up to move into the security department, which was what I was wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to carve out an entire niche within that Fortune 500 company. So we had IT department of like 12, 13 people. I was the one out of the 13 people that did threat and vulnerability management for the company.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave me a big insight into it. And some of the things I did while I was there is I focused on testing the environment and testing our security. Mm-hmm. Continually testing our security, which kind of started building that career. And I had this fascination with embedded technology. All of the new devices that were coming in, appliances for security, appliances for email, and all of these typically devices that we're thinking about, and printers, and this was in the early 2000 range, and where we were just starting to see an influx of some of these technologies, kind of before we started calling them IoT. And we progressed from there. And I started speaking at conferences, and the opportunity came up for me to go to work as a pen tester at an organization. So that kind of took me to that next level, which was really fascinating. And at that location, while I was doing the pen testing, I asked this one question: are multifunction printers contain any good data a pen tester would want to steal? And the guys on the team said, not really. Most of the time you can steal like print jobs or something like that. So that started me down that path of digging into embedded technology further. Mm-hmm. And out of that, we published probably a dozen vulnerabilities or more related to multifunction printers and how someone can steal Active Directory creds out of these multifunction printers. And it continued progressing down the road. And then I eventually moved over to Rapid7, which I've been at for about 11 years. So on the pen test team, about 2 years into that, they came to me and said, hey, we have a role opening up for a researcher to focus on IoT technology. And that kind of landed me where I'm at now. And from there, I kind of built that. I helped the Rapid7 build out their IoT pen test offering, which is going on to this day with a great team of guys. And I continued down that path of doing research, focused embedded device research. And often, once in a while, I'll also do research projects where I partner with larger organizations or companies, where I can dig in further and start looking at how does that IoT impact from a threat landscape perspective, and how are other companies really deploying IoT on a large scale versus just looking at individual devices. And those opportunities have really helped me advance my knowledge much, much more over the years.
Sure.
And that's kind of where it brings us to this today.
Wow. Okay. So being one of the, let's call it greenfield time, maybe not necessarily the first folks, but being early to understanding IoT as a threat, how did you come up with methodologies to test these? And how has your research evolved over time? Because IoT is everywhere now.
Exactly. So early on, when I first took the role of working on IoT technology, we decided we're going to start doing this as an offering at Rapid7. I dug in. There's me and just one other guy that were kind of focused on actually doing the testing.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to say, what is the most value to a company that wants us to test their technology? You have a product, you get ready to go to market with that product. What do we need to think about? And it came down to, what is the definition of IoT? When I first started doing this and saying, okay, what is IoT? We found out that there's really no good definitions of IoT. So I came up with a series of traits. And if these traits apply, often this would be considered IoT.
Mhm.
And those traits cover a number of different areas, but basically, does it utilize embedded technology? Does it also have basically a management and control capability or function that's external to the embedded device? It can be web access, it could be a mobile application, it can be a thick client.
Mhm.
And then it also has some place where it stores data, cloud services, APIs, cloud APIs. So you have these three pieces that communicate.
Mhm.
And with that, we realized that IoT is not a device, it's an ecosystem.
Mhm.
It's made up of these multiple parts. And we defined our whole testing model around that whole ecosystem because we realized early on, if you want me to test your device, if I just look at that device as it sets, I'm missing the big picture because the security of this device could fail if cloud APIs fail. Data storage in the cloud fails,
Mhm.
the mobile application security fails, and vice versa. If something goes wrong here, I can gain access to the cloud data, I can gain access to the mobile application. So we came to the conclusion that an effective security testing methodology needs to focus on that entire ecosystem, all of those three pieces and how those pieces interact with each other. And we test based on that. And it helps us to better test the product and come to more secure conclusions on how to benefit the customer on fixing issues. So
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So when you're testing devices, so at Team Cumry, we've done quite a bit of research around like compromised Soho devices and things like that. So we typically see how bad guys are taking advantage of the admin interfaces, for example, things like that. Web-based vulnerabilities in unpatched software. But aside from those kind of like well-known things, what are some of the regular things that you see being vulnerable in IoT? What are some things that our listeners could be keeping in mind if they happen to be, in the market to upgrade or extend their IoT infrastructure? What are some, let's call them, regular offenses that you guys see?
yeah, probably one of the most common things I find, and looking at almost everyone's IoT implementation, there's always a cloud aspect to it, whether it's web APIs, storage, things like that.
Mhm.
And often of these devices may have 2 dozen different APIs that are actually leveraged. They
Mhm.
can come directly from the device. They could also come via the mobile application or the thick client application to interact this whole thing. And inevitably, I think over and over and over, I always seem to find one API that isn't secured or that I can get past the basic security. And in those cases, I inevitably get things like PII information, address, email addresses, account information,
Mhm.
all of those type of things. And that seems to be very common across a large number of the devices I've looked at.
So what does your methodology look like for approaching this? Is it kind of like hardware fuzzing? Are you just like throw the kitchen sink at it? Obviously, we're not asking you to give away your secret sauce, but can you give us some idea of the methodologies that you apply?
Yeah. So when we're talking about just the hardware, obviously we're going to look at all of its exposed interfaces. What does it have available? Does it have a web interface? Things like that. And we're going to do all the standard testing that's involved.
Mhm.
But also during the IoT ecosystem testing, we'd like to tear the device down. That may be involved getting the firmware off the device.
Mhm.
Can we easily get the firmware off the device? If you're a vendor and that's your intellectual property and we can get all the data off of this, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? You may want to better secure the device,
Mhm.
protect your intellectual property. The other thing we want to do is get like root level access on the device. If I can get root level access to the device, then I'm no longer on the outside looking in. I'm on the inside looking out.
Mhm.
Now I have a view of your entire product ecosystem. ecosystem.
Mhm.
And there's been a number of times over the years, our teams have been able to successfully do that and then pivot from that device to control critical things, all the way to, a few examples where we're able to pivot out of that device into the back end organization and gain access to all the devices or control all the devices that are deployed around the world. So that's always an interesting thing. And the last thing I've been looking at in that, what I consider the three keys of the kingdom, that's the firmware, root level access, is also a method that I started working on several years ago, published a paper on it, and it's dealing with interchip communication analysis. Often when we're looking at a device and it has its entire ecosystem, let's say the embedded device, they do things right. The Bluetooth's encrypted well, the Wi-Fi is encrypted well, or what's going out of Ethernet is encrypted well. If I go into the device, I inevitably find that communication between microprocessors is rarely encrypted. By capturing that data, a lot of times I can do some fairly deep analysis and understand what that whole security mechanism is from end to end.
Okay. So you make use of, which is a hot thing of the day, AI. Do you see AI or machine learning useful in the work that you're doing?
Yes, to me, it is a force multiplier. It is an added tool to the tool belt. Most pen testers will agree with that. It gives us ability to speed certain things up. Let's say I want to write a script, a Python script to do something. I can easily ask and get the base form of that script, make a few modifications, and off I'm going, versus spending 2 hours trying to figure out how to do something. I knock it out in 15 minutes. Same way with information. I don't think a week goes by where I don't go in there and go, hey, I'm looking at this particular chip. It takes certain types of command structures. What kind of information can you tell me about the command structures? And it'll be able to give me that. It'll be able to give me reference and literally save me hours of Googling.
Sure.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, sure. So somebody else Googled it already before you. Might as well make use of it. Yeah. So as you're doing this work, undoubtedly you're finding vulnerabilities, and a lot of the reason why these devices they're kind of fire and forget, right? Because think a printer, you might update firmware, but like your thermostat on your wall, that may just sit there never patched again, even though it's on your Wi-Fi and so on. How do you handle, and what's your thoughts around things like responsible disclosure, in particular when we're talking about potential impacts, in the millions or tens of millions of devices out there? What's your thoughts around responsible disclosure when in relation to IoT manufacturers?
I think it's a critical thing. Rapid7 would refer to it as a coordinated disclosure. So the ultimate goal is we want to work with that vendor, closely with that vendor. The last thing we want to do is cause issues. So we don't want to cause more security problems out there. We don't want to unnecessarily impact anybody. And when we work with vendors and they work closely with us, we usually come to some really good outcomes. Always good outcomes. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And there are times, once in a while, where we encounter vendors that just ignore us. They do not want to be responsive. They don't want to answer our emails. They don't want to fix the problems. And in cases like that, we do eventually have to disclose. So the community out there can take action on their own, whether it's to remove the product or do some kind of mitigation to protect yourself. Often when we publish advisories, I also put mitigations in there. It isn't out there as like, hey, this product's broken, here's a vulnerability, have at it. We're usually include in their mitigations. I would recommend reasonable ones. I would recommend doing this. You may want to filter this communication in your firewall. You may want to turn this particular service off. You may want to hit a more complex password on the device to reduce the potential risk or attack. But having that mitigation in the disclosure, I think, is also critical, especially for organizations, because not everyone can patch immediately. Sometimes it takes time to get around to that. So having effective mitigations also communicated in a disclosure, I think, is very useful.
Join us at Rise USA 2025 in San Francisco on April 8th through the 9th for a unique gathering of cybersecurity professionals, law enforcement, and enterprise teams to tackle today's most pressing cybercrime challenges through TLP-read content and hands-on collaboration. It's free to attend. Visit www.cymru.com/rise to register or check the show notes below for a direct link. That's cymru.com/rise. So I know for a lot of folks, they like to segment their IoT from their OT, from their IT. They try to keep all of these things separate, at least as VLANs and things like that. What's your thoughts on segmentation as a mitigation tool? And should that be, a best common practice? What kind of advice do you give people around that if they were looking to, I won't call it future-proof, but at least plan for the worst?
I think it should be done. I'm a big fan of segmentation. I think it's critical in every environment. I mean, let's think about it. So I have a device on my corporate network. Is it a business enabling technology? And even if it is, these devices themselves should never be calling out to the network. They should not be calling out to the client network. I'm on the network, even a printer. A printer should never initiate a connection to me. I'm the one initiating the connections.
Right.
So let's segment based on that. That will greatly reduce various attacks. Multifunction printers is one I always go to because it's on everyone's network. It's very common. A lot of vulnerabilities show up. I published a vulnerability many, many years ago. I mean, as an example, I published a vulnerability many years ago where I could actually take over a printer with root level access by sending a print job to it. And that was literally not really patchable in a weird way. It was not patchable. Turning off two things on the printer would completely shut it off. But we use that regularly on assessments to pivot because we found out that even if they were doing segmentation, they weren't segmenting their embedded devices. They were letting them flow every way direction. They were just segmenting client machines and server machines. So instantly, I'm on the network. I can jump to a printer, and then from the printer, I could jump to every other subnet, even if I wasn't allowed to have access to it.
Wow. Yeah. And I assume a printer probably running Linux. So if you're going to live off the land, you probably have all the tools that you need, or if nothing else, a warm home to bring your tools into.
Exactly. And it's the same way with cameras. We did the same thing with cameras one time on an assessment. We compromised the camera. All of the networks were segmented. So it was a state government. So it was like the police department, the fire department, the national part of the organization, the governor's mansion, the tech offices. They were all segmented from each other. But we found out the whole infrastructure, camera systems, none of them were segmented, and they had default passwords on there. So we literally logged onto the camera, turned on SSH, connected to it with SSH, and set up a pivot. And we were able to pivot from there to there to there and move across the entire network segments because of lack of segmentation.
Sure.
We're often have been good at segmenting networks that way, but then some of the auxiliary equipment, like printers, like cameras, aren't segmented. So when I see customers going in and going, hey, we're going to take all of our IT or IoT, and we're going to put it in its own VLAN and segment it properly, I get excited. To me, that is the best way to do things, because then if anything's compromised, literally, it's locked into that. If you have proper monitoring in place, you're going to see when the device compromised, and you're going to see when it's from behavior analytics. Hey, here is a conference room management system, and all at once it's like calling all over the network, or trying to call over the network. But we got it segmented, so we're seeing that hit the segmentation of the firewall. Instantly red flags go up, and we can resolve the issue versus the data going out, not being monitored, and it can get access to everything, which is never good.
Right, sure. And some of those devices, like a camera, right, do produce quite a bit of data. They're streaming data constantly. So that's what a better place to hide than something that already talks a lot. So without that segmentation monitoring, you would potentially never notice that was going on. Exactly. So out of technical curiosity, aside from Linux, what are some other common operating system target types that you see that people are using out there? Is like real-time operating systems like QNX, are those used? Is the world mostly run in Linux?
We see a mix. We see a number of different RTOS operating systems, but then a lot of Linux systems out there. I'd have to say you can usually look at a device and tell quickly what it's going to have in it without even opening it up. If it's moving a lot of graphics, images, voice, data like camera systems,
Mhm.
almost always they're going to have some kind of embedded Linux. If it's a sensor-based thing where it's going to say, hey, you have moisture on your floor, or you have this, or something simple like that, often those smaller devices are going to be running some version of RTOS or bare metal code on the microprocessor.
Okay.
So it's a pretty good mix across the board of those different technologies.
Okay. Ever run into BSD? I know NetBSD used to claim they ran on everything. Do you encounter that?
I have not run into NetBSD in a long while. So
Yeah, I have not either. So apparently I don't have a toaster that runs it.
exactly.
So, IoT, and I'm sure this holds true almost everywhere. It's often overlooked, right? Because these devices, they don't typically have a user interface. They don't typically have a person that sits in front of it every day thinking of it and things like that. So a lot of the ability to kind of understand these threats includes awareness. So what advice do you have for folks out there who are trying to build awareness around these type of threat types? How do you build security awareness up to where it includes consciously, like, oh, and we have to secure our IoT stuff? Any pointers for folks that are looking to build programs?
There's kind of a number of things. I always encourage, I speak at a lot of conferences. So I always encourage people, go to the conferences.
Mhm.
There's a lot of categories covered. A lot of times there's categories talking about IoT vulnerabilities, IoT risk, things like that. So take advantage of that. And the other thing for larger organizations, the one thing I've always loved is kind of that internal seminar type thing.
Mhm.
The concept of bringing speakers in to your company and have a multi-hour event where a number of different speakers come in and talk on certain security subjects.
Mhm.
It's a great knowledge share. It's often fun. It's entertaining. I've done that at several companies in the past. And then they get a chance to ask questions, and you get everyone there. You get everything from the person working the front desk to your security to your IT people,
Mhm.
and they can ask any kind of questions they want. And it's a great learning experience. And I think it's a great baseline to probably start with.
Okay. So, and for a CISO out there who's waking up to the reality that they have to keep an IoT also in mind, if they were looking to build out staffing for their team, what are some skills that they should be looking for in security researchers? And if someone were a security researcher looking to get into IoT, what would be some things that they should be looking to brush up on?
So, oh, gosh, that's such a big question.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it covers a lot of different areas. So, the one thing I tell everyone about, it's about having a passion. So, if you have people in your organization and you're looking for a person to do this type of work, look for that person that has a passion,
Mhm.
that has a drive, that has an interest in this stuff. Having skills on, typically for our pen testers that want to really look at the entire ecosystem and understand this from a security testing standpoint, we expect them to understand web security, web API security,
Mhm.
mobile application security, both Android and iOS, embedded technology, hardware. So having that entire ecosystem and understanding, because if you don't understand a core piece of this, then you can't get thorough testing done.
Mhm.
Now, are you going to find somebody that knows it all, especially if you're looking to bring someone up in the ranks internally? Maybe not. But do they know the key pieces? Often, like when we're going to train somebody up, we want them to know the network pen test, the mobile app pen test, the web app pen test, and then we can train them up on the hardware.
Mhm.
We can put them in front of a hardware. We can do the training. There's tons of courses out there, and they have that basic infrastructure ecosystem understanding. And then we just got to teach them, what do they do when they open the lid on a device?
Mhm.
What do you do from there? And that can easily be done through various training programs that are available out there.
Mhm. And is there like a line in the sand where you say, like, if you have this much of an IoT footprint, then you should have someone on staff able to do this type of stuff? Do you have any like rules of thumb, anything like that?
Well, typically, if they're a vendor, they're producing products, which is a lot of what we work with.
Mhm.
Often they will have in-house people, but
Mhm.
then they may augment. using a company like Rapid7 to augment their product testing. If you're an enterprise organization that doesn't do that, but you deploy IoT, which you do, we all deploy it in some fashion, having people that can test IoT may be an overreach, in my opinion. I think having people with broad skills across the gambit that is critical to understand those things. And then you may have people on your organization that are already involved in that may be interested in learning some of those extra skills. So when would you use these? Often, one of the things I've done, if like Rapid7 will say, hey, we're going to deploy a product. We're interested in this product. It's an IoT type product we want to use for some level of business enablement. Hey, Daryl, take a look at this. And I'll often reach out to the vendor that's producing this and discuss doing a thorough test. If I'm going to go through the effort, I usually just give them the results so they learn from it. So I'll write up an entire report. So those are the things I recommend. If you have the staffing and resources to do that, and rarely do organizations have that. So often you need to reach out to other organizations like Rapid7 to be able to have something done like that. We want to buy this product. It's going to be deployed globally in our organization. We're concerned with A, B, or C from a risk or threat perspective. Would you be willing to look at it? And we'll hire you in as a consultant to do that. I think that's often more cost effective than trying to staff up somebody.
Okay.
For most businesses. There are exceptions to that, obviously.
Okay, sure. So if you could change one thing about the way the industry approaches IoT security, what would it be?
That's kind of interesting. So with that question, when you talk about industry, you're talking about the IoT industry, or you're talking about businesses in general?
Well, I think they both have their own perils in either way. So whichever one you'd prefer to answer.
So let's go with businesses. One thing, if I could change about most organizations, is one, they need to figure out what they have for assets right now. Most companies, or a lot of companies, I don't want to say most, don't know what's on their network. The second thing is they need to develop policies and processes focused on cradle to grave. So I want to know when a device is coming into my organization. I want to continue tracking it within my organization, patching it, maintaining it. And when the day comes that I need to get rid of it, I want to actually get rid of it properly. That's probably some of the biggest issues that I've run into. So you look behind me, there's these medical infusion pumps. I did a research project on actual hospital level medical infusion pumps. And as during this vulnerability research project, I discovered something very unique. The devices I was buying on secondary market still had credentials on them.
Sure.
As in Active Directory, I had one with Active Directory creds, Wi-Fi, pre-shared key, passwords, which we know are still valid. So out of the devices I bought, I had five different account information for 5 major hospital chains around the world, around the country, that were still on these devices. We published a paper on it last year. I think it was last year we published that particular paper. But it reminds us that whole cradle to grave. We need to fix this. We need to deal with what's on site, but as we're working on that, let's set policies in place and processes on how we're going to acquisition, secure, maintain, dispose of.
So businesses out there are kind of at the mercy of their vendors, right? In particular, there is a lot of abandoned hardware out there. You know, it did a simple thing in a complex way, so therefore has a complex capability there. What advice do you have for businesses out there who have IoT, but they may not necessarily know, how to reach out to the vendor or to find out if the vendor has updates? Does that just go back to segmentation, would you say? Is that the advice you'd have for them, is just, plan for these things to get compromised if you don't know how to update them?
Yeah, well, if you can't patch it, you can't get a hold of the vendor and you can't get rid of it, you're in trouble. You're in trouble, simple as that. So again, look at the device. Let's start with the most basic security. Typically, old stuff that's been on the network for a while, probably still going to have the default password set on it, because that was something, 10 years ago, that's something we did. You just left default passwords on everything. So you may want to change that. And then think about segmentation. And then also try to identify what it does communicate with.
Mhm.
You know, does this device phone home over the internet? You know, and figure out what its behavior is.
Mhm.
And that way, if you figure out what the norm is, you can monitor for the abnormal.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the three things I would expect you at a minimum to do. I mean, this is the reality of OT environments, manufacturing, operational environments.
Absolutely.
They buy things, it goes onto their network, and it has to have a 15, 20-year shelf life.
Mhm.
Because it's not cost effective to replace it all the time. In those cases, they have to deal with that exact same thing. And often it is, you know, a segmentation or air gapping is probably one of the easiest ways they deal with some of these problems.
Okay. Well, Daryl, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for taking time out to chat with us. If our listeners want to follow up with you, if they want to see what work you're doing, do you have social media and things like that we can include in the show notes, LinkedIn, what have you?
Yeah, I have an X account, and I also have a LinkedIn account. All my papers are published up on LinkedIn or links to them. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include those in the show notes. So, Daryl, thanks again. I hope it was a good time for you. I'm certain our listeners will enjoy to hear about IoT.
thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to the show. Don't forget to join us for our 15th anniversary of RISE in San Francisco on April 8th and 9th. We're always looking for passionate cybersecurity professionals, law enforcement, and threat intelligence analysts to join us for 2 days of TLP Red content sharing and hands-on collaboration in the fight against cybercrime. See you in San Francisco. Check the registration link in the show notes.